Hello and welcome to DSR's Words Matter. I'm David Rothkopf, and I am joined today, as every single week, by Norm Ornstein. I'm very, very hesitant to ask you, Norm, but how are you doing?
I'm persevering. Let's put it that way, David. Uh, this is every day that goes by, we have more horrors and more horror stories. And I think the last week, and especially the last day or two, have been even more horrible.
Well, why is that, Norm? Why is the last day or two more horrible?
I'm going to mention one. Well, let's talk about a couple of things. One is, get rid of the doggy. Um, let's talk about a couple of things. One is what we've seen happening in Chicago and Portland. And it is very clearly, to me, a deliberate effort by Stephen Miller and the people around Trump, by Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, to provoke violence, to get for themselves videos that seem to show riots, but that have actually been created by the mass thugs who are in both of those cities. And that includes video that we've now seen, two involving Catholic priests. One, a priest standing there, basically telling the ICE people in front of him that he's praying for them, and they spray him up close with horrific gas right in the face and disable him. The second, even worse, is a group of people in Portland outside the main ICE facility. They're standing there behind whatever lines there were, and a sniper from the roof sent a projectile onto the head from the roof of a priest who was simply standing there, not near anybody else. And it hit him with significant force on the top of his head, and he collapsed. Then we have, of course, pictures of elderly men and women thrown to the ground while just standing there. What they're trying to do is create violence so that they can further the violence. Add to that we had Donald Trump threatening to imprison the Chicago mayor and the Illinois governor, and in a stunning violation of every norm, the utterly vile, extremist, and corrupt governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, ignoring the plea from his fellow governor and sending troops against court order to sending National Guard to Chicago, to Illinois. So we've got all of that. The second is the Senate. And obviously, it starts with the disgraceful appearance by Pam Bondi in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee at an oversight hearing, refusing to answer almost any question from a Democrat, while Republicans asked no significant questions other than why did the Biden administration tap my phones, which is a lie and wrong, and responding with character assassinations. Uh, and what upset me about that was not just what Pam Bondi said and what Pam Bondi has been doing to uh, turn the Justice Department into basically an avenue for retribution against Trump's enemies. Uh, but something that, in the only reasonable response from a Democratic senator, Adam Schiff, who went through in order instead of asking questions and being treated with character assassination, went through all of the important questions that had been asked that she refused to answer, but then said, "This is an oversight hearing. Why are we not having bipartisan oversight?" And that leads me to a larger point, David, a little bit of a soliloquy here. I've been around the Senate for more than 5 decades. I worked in the Senate. I worked with senators from both parties. I could probably, if pushed, reel off a list of 20, 25 Republican senators over all the decades that I've been around who I worked with. I worked with on reform issues of all different types. I worked with on continuity of government issues. I worked with many of them when I was staff director of a Senate committee that reorganized its committee system. Uh, and there were plenty who were fierce partisans. One example, Alan Simpson, with whom I became very close, a fierce partisan, and somebody who would go to great lengths to support Republican presidents. But every one of those Republican senators, Dick Lugar, Fred Thompson, Olympia Snowe, John McCain, and Alan Simpson, cared about their own institution, cared about the Constitution, um, did real oversight, called out an administration of their own party when it did something wrong. These people, to an individual, the Republicans in the Senate Judiciary Committee said nothing when Pam Bondi gave them a middle finger, gave their institution a middle finger. Same with Kash Patel when he had appeared. And then let's add one other element, which has gone largely unnoticed. John Thune brought up for one vote en bloc 106 confirmations for Trump executive positions, including utterly unqualified people like Sergio Gore and Herschel Walker. I have a particular sore spot with Herschel Walker because I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, and the worst trade in the history of football was the Vikings giving up their future for Herschel Walker. But that aside, the whole idea of a core power of the Senate, advice and consent, is whether it's your president or the other party's president, when that president nominates somebody for a significant position, you are going to vet that person and put them through some paces to determine whether they are honest, qualified, capable. They did 106 with none of that, basically giving up. They've given up their power of oversight. They've given up their power of legislating. They've given up their power of advice and consent. And it's shocking because every senator, every Republican went along with this en bloc confirmation of 106 people. So, as somebody who's really admired, revered Congress, it's been, a core part of my life, the Senate, where I worked and where I've done work. To see this happening is so disheartening combined with every other thing that we're talking about. But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln,
Other than that, you're doing great.
yeah,
Um, well, let me pick up on that last point because, the Democrats never do that stuff. Mitch McConnell rams through Supreme Court justices in 7 days, but blocks Merrick Garland for a year. Um, Democrats are always like, well, we can't do this. This is the nuclear, this will blow us up. This will end procedure. And they're constantly getting screwed. And I was thinking of this in one point. You wrote a good piece on how the Democrats need to stick to message, which I thought was a good piece. And I think that the point on healthcare does have a lot of resonance for people with regard to this shutdown. But the Democrats voted through this thing in the spring.
yeah,
And now they're like, well, now we're really going to show some fight. But they let this thing happen in the spring. Mike Johnson is denying a duly elected representative from New Mexico her seat because he doesn't want to have 218 votes to release the Epstein files. And the Democrats aren't doing anything about it. The Democrats are negotiating with Donald Trump on this government shutdown issue. even though Donald Trump, for the past 8 months, has said, I don't care what the laws the Congress passes. I don't care what you say we're going to spend. We're going to say what I spend. And there doesn't seem to be anybody saying, well, there, there better be a provision here that ensures that he follows this, because otherwise, this is just a useless document. And so they just seem to be getting hosed all the time. But perhaps because you're up close, you see the secret strategy, the master plan at work.
Oh, I wish. You know, we will look back on Michelle Obama's "When they go low, we go high," and the fact that Democrats have generally followed that practice with horror. And it's pretty clear that we need a "when they go low, we go lower" at this point, and we're going to need that further on down the road. It's not just that they are ostensibly negotiating with Donald Trump, who said he was going to negotiate and then stopped. He has now created a designated negotiator in the Senate, Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. Now, Mark Wayne Mullen is not the dumbest senator, but he's in the top five, and is, if you were, the only thing that they could do that would be worse would be to have a triumvirate of Tommy Tuberville, Marsha Blackburn, and Mark Wayne Mullen doing these negotiations. And of course, it's farcical. Um, what we have to hope is that Democrats in the Senate hold firm on this, because I believe they now have a very significant upper hand. Something I discussed on a DSR pod yesterday with the great Greg Sargent, as Greg pointed out, that Democrats have a terrific opening now because Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, has broken with the Republicans in Congress to say we cannot let these ACA subsidies go away and double or triple the premiums of my constituents or all these others. We have to uh, give them back the rates that they've been getting. So you now have a crack in the facade of the congressional Republicans. We know that far more people getting health care through the Affordable Care Act and having subsidized premiums are in red states and red districts than in blue ones. And at the same time, we know that this is a different shutdown. You know, most of the shutdowns that we've had have been under divided government. And if you've got divided government, it's pretty easy for a president using the bully pulpit to put the blame back on Congress and back on the other party. That's what Bill Clinton was able to do with Newt Gingrich back during that disastrous shutdown during the Clinton presidency. It didn't work with the longest shutdown under Donald Trump, because Trump said, I'm doing the shutdown. So he made that clear. Now people understand Republicans are running things. They don't care about arcane things like filibusters. And at the same time, you're going to have a whole lot of the people Trump wants in place, from air traffic controllers to ICE agents and FBI agents, who live paycheck to paycheck, or at least need, after a very short period of time, some money coming in to pay the mortgage or pay the rent or pay for food. And they're not going to stand for working 60 hours a week without getting any money. And remember, one of the things that happens with furloughed federal employees is, if you're furloughed, you're not getting paid, you can go out and get a part time job and at least bring some money in so you have a little cushion to go along. If you're in one of those essential categories, you can't do that. So they're going to face plenty of pressure, and their constituents are going to bitch about it. And we know that these subsidies, when, if and when they disappear on January 1, long before January 1, the insurance companies are going to send out premium notices to all of their subscribers, and knowing that the subsidies are going to disappear, the premium notices that they're going to get for January are double or triple what they're paying. So you're going to have a huge backlash. Democrats, I believe, if they hold firm this time, can bring those Republicans to the negotiating table. Frankly, David, I think I would settle for a 1 year extension of the subsidies so that knowing that they will then disappear in January 1 of 2027 as we're approaching those midterm elections, let them hold firm again and have those notices go out. And at the same time, as you said, they can hold to get guarantees that there won't be a bait and switch. Trump using the rescission power that they will cave on, or using the illegal pocket rescissions to take away whatever they've agreed to. So they have a chance here now to at least turn a little something around. And if they don't, if they get weak kneed and cave again, if they don't have a plan, and by the way, if they don't follow my plea to them, which is to pound away at this every day in every venue they can, they're trying to take away your health care. We won't let them. Then they don't deserve to be an opposition political party, much less a governing party.
Yeah, and which is a point your piece made extremely well, I thought.
Thank you.
But just to go back to your Michelle Obama point, I don't think you know that even the language is right on that. It's not going low to play hardball if they're playing hardball.
Yeah.
And I think the Republican Party doesn't believe the Democrats are willing to play at governing the way they do.
Yep.
Otherwise, if you're Pam Bondi or you're Kash Patel or you're somebody else in the government or you're, one of these obstructionists on the Hill or something, you don't behave the way you do. But they believe there will be no consequences for them. Trump is like, well, I've got immunity and I can pardon myself and I can pardon the people around me. If Democrats don't figure out a way to send the message that Republicans will be held accountable for attacking democracy, attacking our cities, withholding funds, trying to eviscerate the Congress's power, et cetera, they're going to keep doing it. They're just going to say we're playing a bunch of patsies here. I mean, and I don't even know if this shutdown negotiation is actually going to impact their view that they can just act with impunity.
No, I agree. And, speaking of playing hardball, we're getting some really good statements, especially made by people like Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, um, the same with the governor of Oregon. I think they need to take that further. We had one commendable instance I saw on video of a Portland police officer telling an ICE guy in a van who was about to drive into a group of protesters, "You stop right now. You go any further, I will arrest you." And why do we not have Chicago police, Portland police, Illinois state troopers arresting ICE agents or others who are posing in that way, who are violating their own laws, who are assaulting innocent people? You get a guy, a sniper, up on the roof, fires down on an unprotected, unprovoked priest and injures him. There ought to be Portland police heading up to that roof to arrest this guy and throw him in the pokey. You have Texas National Guard coming to Chicago, and the picture of them, by the way, it was a little bit like somebody sent me the picture from Saturday Night Live of John Goodman and the others of Chicago Bears sitting around the Bears. I mean, every one of these people getting out of the plane in Chicago weighed 300 pounds, and clearly it looked like they were all going there for a hot dog eating contest. Have the Illinois State Trooper.
Everything's bigger in Texas, Norm.
That's right. But after Pete Hegseth talked about no more fatties in the military, it was kind of jarring.
I thought the same thing because
Yeah,
I mean these guys were morbidly obese, one
yeah.
after another, and they were sort of unloading. But again, Greg Abbott doesn't think there are any consequences to
Yep.
sending Texas troops to invade Illinois.
If I were JB
How can we
Pritzker,
let this be?
yeah, if I were JB Pritzker, I would tell Greg Abbott, you know what? Come next November, I'm sending a ton of Illinois National Guard to protect against the election fraud and intimidation that you are about to unleash. Uh, let them understand that there are consequences. And frankly, I think you have every reason to have the state troopers arrest the Texas National Guard, among other things, for weapons violations. Um, they're, you know, they're all armed. Of course, that's the other thing. These National Guard people play at war. They have no idea what they're doing. They have no training in any of this. And we're going to see even more consequences. We know in Chicago, we had an instance, and now at least there's a lawsuit being brought about a woman who was shot multiple times, where the ICE agent who shot her said, she rammed my car. We have video footage that he rammed her car, got out and said, say something, bitch, and shot her. So they're suing. I'm sure they'll get a ton of money. Arrest that son of a bitch and charge him with attempted murder. It's time to show that there are consequences for what are outrageous illegal actions by these thugs who are unleashed by Stephen Miller.
Right. And who are violating the law. This is the thing
Yeah.
systematically. Going into homes without a warrant is a violation of the law. Using force against these people, violation of the law. Rounding up U.S. citizens, violation of the law. And the Trump approach is arrest everybody. If we get a few of them wrong, the courts will sort it out later.
Well, what we also know,
Democrats can play that game too.
what we know is that Stephen Miller set a quota of 3,000 people detained every single day. And we know that these agents who are basically being told that they will be punished if they don't reach the quota are just rounding up anybody, including citizens, throwing them into detention illegally so that they can say they've met that quota.
Um, Based on everything you just said, though, do you think this shutdown's going to end anytime soon?
I believe that the longest shutdown we've had was in the first Trump term. It was 35 days. It's very hard to keep it going for much longer than that because all the people you're relying on in essential places can't go for a long time without getting paid. They'll be offered loans. If you are, let's say that you're making $50,000 a year and uh, you've got a mortgage or a rent payment, and you don't have a lot of money in the bank to pay with the hope and expectation that at some point, months down the road, you'll get it back under the law. And you're told, well, get a bridge loan from a bank in which you're going to have to pay interest, or max out your credit cards in which you will have to pay interest. A lot of these people are going to stop showing up for work, and others are going to bitch like crazy to the president and his cabinet members and the Republicans around them. And the pressure to end this is going to be very substantial. But the key to all of this, going back to where we started, is and what worked with this shutdown, what would have been much more difficult if they Democrats had capitulated for the second time this time around, is they have to make it, and it is already on the way to making it crystal clear that if nothing happens and insurance premiums skyrocket and hospitals close, it's because of Republicans. And that's what will make them end the shutdown and do something about it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's always self interest. And if they think they're going to lose, If they,
Yeah.
they, and by the way, right? I mean, going 35 days will put you squarely on the other side of it, middle of November, I guess, beginning of November, and we're a year out from the election.
Yeah.
And that election is looming large. Now, a lot of people are afraid that sending these troops into these cities is part of a sort of a plan to set the stage for intimidating voters in these places. Is that something you're concerned about? And what is it that um, you know people who want to have a free and fair election can do to avoid Trump and company putting their thumb on this?
So let me add, circling back, one thing I didn't mention was Trump, although we knew this was coming, openly talking about invoking the Insurrection Act, declaring martial law, bringing the military in around the country, and maybe canceling the election as a consequence. But that aside, we know that the gerrymandering that they're doing in a number of states is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they're going to do to try and tilt the election. And we know, among other things, that they're going to try and curtail vote by mail so that there are long lines. And with those long lines, they're going to take all kinds of steps, including sending military and ICE agents to places where there are long lines, in particular in areas where there are lots of Hispanic voters or other people of color. And they will pull citizens out of the line, beat them up, throw them into vans, take them to detention facilities, maybe let them go 2 or 3 days later, all designed to get people to say, Jesus, I better get out of this line. I might be the next one. We know that they're going to do whatever they can to intimidate voters. We know that the Justice Department, which normally acts to protect elections and the rights of voters, is going to be on the opposite side. So, one, we need to make sure, among other things, in the elections ahead, much as I have cringed at what the Democratic candidate for Attorney General in Virginia, Jay Jones, said in a tweet, a vicious one, a couple of years ago, that to allow the cultist Republican Jay Menares to be reelected as Attorney General means that we will have more voter intimidation in Virginia, which is a very important state. So we have to make sure that we get those people elected. We have to make sure that we give money to organizations that are aiming to do voter protection, including Protect Democracy, the Democracy Defenders Fund, and others that are both going to file lawsuits. But also, we need state officials to make sure that they have their forces, their National Guards, their state troopers out to counter whatever intimidation takes place. And at the same time, obviously, we need to make sure that the candidates in these swing districts and states are funded well enough. But we know from what Trump and his thugs have done in cities around the country, in areas around the country, on immigration, that they have no bounds, they have no boundaries. So we can't just rely on laws. We're going to have to find ways to counter intimidation, including the use of force.
Yeah, we can also expect, I think, because he said he's going to do it, Trump to go after New York City in new ways if Zoran Mamdani is elected mayor. Trump refers to him as a communist. Cuomo this past couple of days, who's the Trump candidate right at the moment, said, well, if Mamdani gets elected, Trump will, invalidate the election, because he's a communist threat. I mean, he's not a communist, and all this talk is insane. But I think on some level, Trump thinks this works for him with his base. Does it? And doesn't it invite other kinds of retribution?
Yes, to a point. There's a caveat here. I think that base, 35% of the country, and all the stuff that they're doing, the thuggery, is aimed at the base. And by the way, one other thing that I would like to see done, I'd like to see um, decent billionaires, maybe Mark Cuban would be a part of that coterie, who would now do and fund a massive media campaign across all types with videos of what they're doing in these cities, of throwing a woman to the ground, beating the shit out of her, and then having the guy who did it be suspended for a day and then reinstated. Showing a veteran in his late 60s standing there talking to a couple of ICE and other people, being violently thrown to the ground with his wife getting a concussion. The reason is a whole lot of voters, including most of those Trump voters who watch Fox, don't know that this stuff is happening or accept the lies that this is because of riots and that the ones who are provoking it all are the ones who are being slam dunked and beaten up and arrested, so that we can change the narrative on this. That's one part of it. But what we also know is a large share of that base, even if they've been motivated in the past more by tribal and social issues than anything else, are really hurting economically. There's a reason why Mondami won handily the nomination in New York City. He had one word, one issue that was the dominant one, done brilliantly: affordability. We had an Iowa State Senate seat, a vacancy, a special election, one that Trump won by 20 points, turned around, the Democrat won. One issue: affordability. The tariffs are killing people. And I'll tell you, David, just another little aside. A very good friend named Gene Ludwig just wrote a book called The Mismeasurement of America. We are deeply underestimating, with the statistics that we use on employment and unemployment, on inflation, the pain for lower and middle income people, because we do not measure them the right way. And in fact, people are suffering far more. If you look at inflation for the things that people actually buy, not the 77-inch television sets or the luxury yachts or the Jaguars and Mercedes Benzes, but the food and the rent and the basic supplies, it's much higher, and people are falling further behind, and the tariffs are deeply exacerbating that. If health premiums go up, you're going to have a backlash from a good part of that base, along with the 15% of Americans who voted for him because they didn't think government did anything for them, and they didn't like the inflation under Biden and the affordability issues, who now see that it's worse and understand what's happening. So I think this can backfire in a big way on Trump. His approval is held at around 38%, which means the base is stuck with him through all of this, in part because plenty of them don't know really what's going on. And others, it's more about owning the libs and sticking it to the enemy. But you start to see that number drop to 30%, the approval drop to 30%, maybe a handful of House and Senate Republicans get a spine and start to push back a little bit. I think we have a real prospect of those things happening. Now, Trump's going to respond to that by uh, uh, basically getting even meaner and more vicious and more violent. But we need to have something happen that begins to erode his support even further. And I think it's because he's screwed up big time on the issues that really matter to people in their daily lives.
Yeah, well, and I think that largely is because he doesn't care about
Yeah,
them. But as my
sure.
last question here, um, you know, people are looking ahead to next year as the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Trump's also looking ahead to his next birthday. He announced he's going to have a professional wrestling match on the south lawn of the White House to mark his next birthday. Bound to,
It ought to be a sumo wrestling match
well,
to
yeah,
really
we
make
could
it
have some of those
part of
Texas
him.
National
Yeah,
Guard
yeah.
involved in that. But I have another way to look at next year that I think Trump is going to have to deal with, based on what you're saying, and that the GOP is going to have to deal with in the run up to the election, because it's going to be the year of FAFO. It's going to be the year of fuck around and find out. You could have Donald Trump imposing all of these kind of crazy laws and doctrines and so on and so forth throughout this year, but the price of healthcare hasn't gone up yet. And you said it could go up 3 times. There are 2 states in which the healthcare premiums will actually quadruple under this. But the people haven't really felt the sting of the inflationary pressures from these crazy tariffs. Um, Trump and company are not feeling the fact that there is going to be a steady flow of videos of their abuses. But there are even others. Today, the price of gold, I'm sure you watch this carefully because you have a basement full of it, but the price of gold hit $4,000 an ounce. And you might think, well, that's irrelevant and it's just a bunch of survivalists or it's just a bunch of speculators or whatever. That's not why this is happening. What's happening is that the world is losing faith
Yep.
in the United States government. And that is going to be, when you talk about fuck around, find out, if the dollar is not the world's reserve currency and somebody starts to replace it, Trump thinks he can capitalize on that with crypto, but the Chinese have a different idea. If the dollar is not the reserve currency, if the US can't borrow at preferred rates because nobody trusts us any longer, that makes big difference when you have giant deficits, as the United States does. There are other ways that this fucking around is going to produce finding out that are going to be hugely painful.
So I'd have two responses to that. One is when I saw the price of gold get over $4,000 an ounce, I thought, uh-oh, some of these thugs in the private prisons and detention camps are going to start to extract the teeth from the poor migrants and citizens who are being brought in. Uh, but the second is exactly what you said. Trump keeps pushing for lower interest rates. He keeps hammering away at the Fed. The Fed controls one set of interest rates, which is the short term treasury rates. They don't control the long term treasury rates. And exactly what you said, if people lose faith in the dollar as a reserve currency, and the price of gold soaring certainly is an indicator of that, how do you attract the money coming in that you need to borrow to pay for debt service and for government? And the way you do that is you attract people to invest in long term treasuries, and you're going to have to jack up those rates to get people willing to do it if they no longer trust the dollar in the same way. So we're going to have a double or triple whammy that flows from all of this, and it will not be pretty. And I think, Trump surrounded by lickspittles, including a Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who knows better, but does nothing to counter any of the ridiculous claims that this guy who has a Wharton degree that should never have been given to him and knows nothing about international or domestic economics except what he learned as a real estate guy, a buffoon as his chief economic advisor, my former colleague Kevin Hassett, who just repeats all the talking points, a commerce secretary who doesn't know better. um, we could end up in a really worse place in economic terms.
And well, and to tie the point back to the point you're making, I don't, I'll have to look it up, but I think it's February 1st, early next year. Trump can replace Powell as the head of the Fed,
Yeah,
and he's going to go and
March.
put in what part is it?
I
March?
think it's March. Yeah.
Yeah. But the point is he's going to put in somebody who's a stooge because that's what he does.
Yep.
And the world is going to see that and react in a way that is going to be super uncomfortable for the United States of America. And there's nobody to tell him this. But I want to end on a point that we seldom get to here, because I revere you and I talk you up and stuff like that. But I want to say that, in a way, this conversation makes me think you're a schmuck, and that also I'm a schmuck.
Mm.
That we're both schmucks, and that goes because I remember, and you remember, that from 1934 to 1971, when we were conscious people, the price of gold was $35 an ounce.
Yep.
We didn't buy the gold when it was $35 an ounce, Norm. It's $4,000 an ounce.
Yep.
What were we thinking?
We can kick ourselves over many such bad decisions.
Yeah.
Of course, having a stockpile of gold, it's not clear what you do with it anyhow. Paul Krugman actually has a piece on that today. What are you going to do with gold bars? You can't take them to the grocery store.
Well, now that they're $4,000 an ounce, I could only afford like a sliver of a bar
That's
anyway.
right.
It's easy. It's it's easy to get,
Well,
but the
neither
point
of
is,
us is worth his weight in gold. I'll tell you that.
that's for damn sure.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something. I just think this is a really important point that people aren't making, and maybe
Yeah.
we can get people to start doing it here. The real negative consequences of Trump and Trumpism aren't being felt yet,
Yeah.
and they're not short term, and they can't be reversed with an election. If you think the world is ever going to look at the United States the way that it did for the past 100 years and say, well, it can't go back, that Trump thing, that was an aberration. That's just not the way it's going to be. Our allies won't look at it that way. Investors won't look at it that way. And that's got a cost. I mean, it's got a real cost. It's not just geopolitics. The price of borrowing stuff goes up. The price of buying stuff goes up. Our leverage, our soft power in the world is diminished. And we've got to pay attention because it's like that old saying about bankruptcy. How does it happen gradually and then all at once?
Yep. I think that's a terrific point to end on, and you're absolutely right that the damage here, a good part of it, is permanent, or at least will last much longer if we somehow, with great good fortune and fortitude, come out of this reasonably intact. If somehow Trump and his cohort, including the vile Republicans running Congress, are gone, and we have a Democratic president and Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, although we will still have a set of partisan hacks in the Supreme Court. But if all of that happens, nobody around the world is going to trust us and say we can just go back to the way things were, because they know, with Trump having won a second term, that somebody like him can come back in another 4 years.
That is right. And it goes back to our first point. And we should hammer it home. And that is, unless there are consequences for Trump, unless it appears to the world this can't go back there, they're not going to believe it unless we make the changes that we need to in the structure of the United States, whether it's admitting new states or expanding the Supreme Court or change the rules in the Senate or whatever, in the ways people are going to look at us and they're going to say, this is going to happen again. They need to see a massive effort by the United States to restore trust in our system with real teeth, or you're right, these are permanent.
And we're going to need, if we get all of that, a Nuremberg type proceeding. We are going to need to hold accountable people who have openly violated the law and the Constitution. We're going to need an attorney general like a Doug Jones who will step up and make sure that the appropriate people are in fact prosecuted. If Democrats come back to this and say, we are going to restore the old norms and we're not going to do what he did, this won't be an administration of retribution, if they basically ignore what happened and let these people off, then the consequences are going to be even more severe.
Right.
All of those thugs will know that they can come back and get away with it again.
Right. And somebody's got to go in and go into the Supreme Court, however it's constituted. And I hope it's
Yep.
got 13 members by the time this happens. But somebody's going to have to go in there and say, well, the precedent this court set was the president has immunity on official acts. But if he does something unconstitutional, by definition, it cannot be official.
Yep.
And so he does not have immunity if he is stealing in violation of the Emoluments Clause. He does not have immunity if he is X, Y, or Z in violation of the Constitution.
Absolutely. And I would also say that if this Supreme Court, which is giving Trump unbelievable power, not just a unitary executive kind of power to fire anybody that he wants in independent agencies or across the federal government, but saying right now that he can take away the power of the purse from Congress. If you get a Democratic president and they suddenly go back to curtailing the powers of that president, I think we have to have a president who says this Supreme Court is clearly acting in illegitimate ways. And
Right.
we either have to
And
change
we
it
need
or ignore it.
that
I
is
hate to say that, but that's the reality. If in fact they
it's
become partisan hacks on the other side, um, then we need to call that out.
absolutely right. The changes that need to happen are not going to happen with the flip of a switch or the flip of control of one or both houses of Congress. That has to have concrete actions. Well, we'll talk about that here each and every week. I hope the week ahead is a good one for you and
The
a
same
safe
for you.
one. And we'll see you next week. And everybody, we've got all our other podcasts coming. So come to the DSR Network. I didn't do a break in the middle of this one. You know why I didn't do a break? Because my dog was barking, and it was just too damn hard with the dog barking. But don't punish us for that. If you want to be a member, go to the dsrnetwork.com, click on membership, and for a few bucks a month, you can help support what we're doing here. We've had a lot of growth recently, a lot of really good growth, thanks to you. But we want to keep the momentum going. I think you're starting to realize from us and from 100 other places the value of independent media. Help support it. It doesn't take much. For now, thank you, Norm. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye-bye.